Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're going to take a look at Dragonfire today. It's been kindly presented to us by Denise Audio, so thank you very much to those guys over there. And we're going to take a listen to our trans kick and bass bus. So these where the two bass layers are going in with the kick, and then we use some parallel heavy compression to then simulate a nice fuller sound when it is mixed in parallel. Okay, so Dragonfire is currently switched off, so let's have a listen to what we've got to work with, and then I'll turn Dragonfire on just using the drums all-in-one parallel preset. And it's not designed for kick and bass specifically, but we can adapt it, and that's what we're going to do in this video today. And what we're hearing there is Dragonfire just punching in there with the drums in parallel preset, and it's not designed specifically, like I said before, for kick and bass, especially in the trance genre. This is just a drums all-in-one parallel preset, but we can tweak this, and the main thing that we're going to look at, I've already balanced the gain out. I think it comes at plus 10 dB, just balanced it down so the A and B comparison wasn't just showing you a louder signal. And a quick look around Dragonfire before we start. We have our gain reduction meters here, we have our EQ controls as well as our solo band area, just by clicking on the different bands, and these settings up here work in conjunction with you moving on the graph here. We have a random button here, so if you're into creating weird and wacky effects and you just want some quick results or some ideas, this will give you that. We have our sidechain button here, no more to be explained, that is sidechain. Then we have our drive. Now this is how much saturation is applied to the sound in conjunction with how much you want it to apply in a certain area, like here. And that's based on the idea of old tube compressors. The more you drive the signal into the compressor, the more saturated it becomes. So we have an independent control here to control how much saturation we want. Curve gives you the option to have a snappier responding compressor or an opto style compressor, which is a lot slower at 100%, and we can mix between these two if we so wish to do so. RMS is just enabling transparency. That's the best way to understand it. So we can make this compressor a lot more transparent and not as obvious, which isn't going to matter too much in our demonstration because we're using a parallel compression. And finally, knee, we have a fast and a slow knee at 100%. Fast at 0, slow at 100. So we can mix between there. And finally, here at the bottom, we have our familiar controls: threshold, ratio, attack and release, high pass and low pass filters, so the compressor will only react to the range that you set it to, the pull feature and the mix, as well as clipping and gain. So let's take a listen to what Dragonfire can do for us on this bus compression. So I'm going to turn the mix up to 100%, so we're hearing the 100% edited signal, and then we can mix that back into around 50% to get an idea of how punchy we can make it. So let's take a listen and increase the threshold. So you can hear this is just crushing that bass and kick, and I'm going to mute the hats, claps here so that we can hear our original signal. And let's bring that down to around minus 40 dB there. So we've got a heavily compressed signal. It's far too much. We've lost all the details of the kick, the bass, and it's just really, really quiet. But everything will have a nice, compact, saturated feel. So we're going to bring in some drive. So that's far too much. And I'm going to be conservative and have it around 18 to 20%. The curve we're going to leave down at 0%, the RMS at 0%, and the knee at 0. So we want a faster acting compressor. We don't want any transparency in this because we're doing parallel compression, but we can have a look at how that sounds. And the knee, we want it to be quite sharp so that we get instant reactions. So let's mix in this signal. So we've got a little bit more punch out of the kick now and a little bit more presence in the bass. Let's just have a listen bypassed. So we can hear that the kick's got a little bit quieter, the bass is more prominent, it has a lot of texture in there, but we want things to be a little bit more biased towards the kick, letting it snap through a little bit more. Now, Dragonfire has the all-in-one parallel preset loaded, and we've heard the before and after on what that sounds like, and this is all default settings. So we're going to make this a little bit more compatible with the kick and bass mix that we have here, and I've turned off the hats and the claps here so that we can actually just focus on the main things in the bus. I'm going to put the mix to 100%. So you can see there's a lot of gain reduction there happening, about minus 26 dB of gain reduction, and we want this compressor to absolutely squash the living daylights out of this sound because we're going to mix it in parallel and bring back 50% or near enough there of the original signal to bring the punch back, and the actual compressor is going to add that layer in behind that original signal to give it a nice full body, and it'll solidify and glue the kick and the bass together so it sounds a bit more uniform instead of just like a separate kick and a separate bass. So let's just quickly bring this back in. So I've just brought down the gain a little bit just to make an even comparison between the two signals because we reloaded the preset to default, and we are going to remove some of this drive for now, so we're just going to put it down to 0. So putting the mix back up to 100%, let's bring the drive. So we don't want to drive this too hard, pardon the pun, and we're going to put this around 20% for now and just mix this back in and see what difference it makes. So we're going to drive it around that 20% mark. And let's pull this back down to 50-ish%. For example, if we want some more of the metallic element of the mid bass to come out, around this node here is where we're going to want to boost that. And when we boost it, it's actually going to increase that metallic element because that's the frequency range it's in. And coupled up with the drive and obviously the hard compression, this is going to sound quite nice. Back up to 100%. So you can hear it's very quiet, it's bringing up that level again. So let's just turn the threshold down, we can put it back where it was and just listen to this bit more audibly. So that is a very metallic area, and sometimes you don't want to boost this too much, so we're just going to boost it moderately, and that is going to be around, let's just double click here and just put 2 for 2 dB on the dot. Bring the mix down to 50 and squash this back down to around 42. And we brought some more of the metallic elements out now. Let's increase it. We can remove it nearly entirely. Let's go a bit drastic here, and you can see there's a little grey line here which is part of the pull control, and we can control how much of that curve is actually influencing that frequency range. So that's 100%. And again, 100% mix, and we'll drop the threshold so we can hear it a bit louder, and you'll hear this push and pull technique. So we're going to have it respectably somewhere in that lower portion, somewhere between 15 to 30%. That should give you a nice blend. So it's not too much taken off it, but it's not too much that it's actually affecting the sound quite drastically. And it's a better way to control your sound with more minute steps. So let's put the threshold back up again. Mix to 50%. And now we've added more definition to that mid bass, having that metallic sound. We want the compressor to react really fast. We don't want any sort of transparency on that. We want it to be obviously compressed when we mix it through in parallel. And the knee, we just want the compressor to react as fast as possible. So now we've taken a look at Dragonfire on the whole kick and bass bus. Let's have a look at the mid layer on its own. We have two mid layers. One's an accent, so it adds a little bit extra onto some of the notes to make them sound a little bit more pronounced. And then we have the main mid layer as well. So the main mid layer sounds like this, with the mid layer on top with a little bit of chorusing. So it's just adding a little bit of extra flavour to the two mid layers. So starting on a mid bass layer, just that alone, not any sort of bus compression, this is just on the main inserts for this channel, we can add Dragonfire. Jumping into the presets, we have quite a few bass presets here down to tight low end and controlled. So let's have a listen to all of these in context. Let's listen to control first. So we can see the way this has been set up. It sounds like it's added a ton of saturation in, when really it's got nothing at all in terms of saturation, just the natural sound of Dragonfire, and it sounds really good. Depending on how you are mixing your tracks, that is a good starting point for getting some bass control, exactly as it says there. And don't forget, we can do mixing in parallel as well, so we can actually get the best of both worlds. So that's a really nice feature. I do like bass control as a preset. Let's take a look at the next one, which is cut through. So this is designed to obviously cut the bass through. You can see we've got a lot of control over this top end. So it does give you a lot of extra brightness on there, and if that's what you're looking for on some of your mid-bass layers, maybe on the accent layer that would work a bit better. And finally, I want to show you what this is going to do to our open hats. We had that open hat loop playing with that original kick and bass layer. So let's have a listen to how we can make these sound a little bit more snappy, a bit more punchy, and rounded at the same time. First, we're going to increase the threshold to about 52, that sounds about right, nice and over compressed, and we're going to bring up the drive. So around the 50 to 60% area seems to sound satisfactory, and we're going to have a little bit of transparency in this. And I'm going to set the curve to around 50% as well, and this is just to have the best of both of the slow and the faster response rates of compression. The knee I'm going to leave as where it is, and what we're going to do is boost the top end and utilise the high and low pass filters here. So now we're compressing the upper portion more. And what that's doing is adding more click to our hats. And then we're going to use the high pass filter to bypass all of these frequencies down here, and then we're going to blend it till it gets to the point where the hats sound thin, and then we're just going to pull it back to obviously give it a nice balanced sound. So So about 8.9 kilohertz seems to satisfy that sound. And then we're going to mix in some of the original signal to about 58%. So they don't sound as bright, but they have a lot more control. So let's have a listen to how these sound. They sound a little bit duller, but they have a lot more control, and we're looking for the control, but how can we make it so they sound a bit brighter? We can come back here. And you can hear the push and pull. We're going to have that a bit lower in this case. And now we'll have bright hats just as they went in, but we'll have a more hard-hitting sound. It'll sound a little bit rounder and we'll have more overall control. So this is before. And finally, would I use this for my kick and bass layers? I probably wouldn't use Dragonfire for the kick and bass layers. There are a couple of options out there that I would use over Dragonfire. However, with individual track processing, Dragonfire is definitely going to be something that I will be using. So like with the mid layer example that we just did, that is going to be something that I will be doing and experimenting more with Dragonfire to see what I can get out of it. Because pulling out those details of the metallic elements, or pulling out or removing the boxiness of those areas, is going to be really interesting on the sound design front. And there we have it. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you get to see all of my new uploaded videos as soon as they go live. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.